Hey guys, just wanted to make a quick review video on this mountain bike. Why I'm making this video is basically I felt like there are no real reviews on this bike, and when I was looking into purchasing one, I went through a bunch of different, obviously, companies and just trying to figure out which bike works best for me and why I decided on this Ghost. And it's the Ghost SLAMR. I think it's like the 2.9, the 2020 version that's coming from REI. I know a lot of people, at least online, have posted about how REI is making the bikes, and you guys can all Google that. Basically, Ghost is a company from Germany. They design their own bikes, and then REI is the only distributor in the US that's basically selling them right now. And so really quickly, why I purchased this bike, and then kind of what are some issues and or problems that I had with it already. Basically, it is May 29th, 2020, and I was getting into mountain biking, pretty new, and everything is basically sold out until like August of 2020, just because of coronavirus and then supply and demand and stuff like that. And so this is one of the few bikes that was actually still in stock when I was shopping around that was budget friendly. And when I say budget friendly, I was looking for around $2,000, which is to me pretty absurd for a starter package for a full suspension bike, for just somebody who's just trying to see if they're interested in the sport. And so I personally wanted to spend as little money as possible, but get still some reasonable, like an adequate bike. And so I looked at all of the, direct to consumer and then kind of like the budget friendly lines of all like the stereotypical ones that people recommend, like the Trance, the Marins, the Rift Zone, I think Hawk Hill. I looked at Polygon, which is a direct to consumer bike. Vitus, I think Mythique. Commensal. I think there was a couple other companies in there too that I was looking at. And once again, one of the biggest issues was just supply and demand. Like everybody was out of stock until basically August or basically July, and I didn't want to wait that long and miss out on this riding season. And so looking at all the specs, basically all these bikes were very, very similar. Obviously there were some minor differences on whether the fork setup, suspension travel, and then the rear shock, and then all the geometry settings, but they were very, very close to each other. And so at that point, REI was having their anniversary sale, and I was like, hey, it's in stock, might as well buy it and see what happens. And so I paid, with the anniversary sale, it was $1,700 plus tax, and so it was right under $1,800 for the bike. And so just short story, love the bike. I've taken it out 3 times already, had a blast. I think it's amazing for what it is. And now I'm going to go into a couple more nuances, which I felt like there were some issues, whether it be from REI or just the company itself. And so the very, very first one, which is kind of my fault for not looking at the reviews on REI's website a little bit, but just the frame design on the swing arm and the shifter cable. And this happened, and there was an individual who posted on there that wrote the exact same thing happened to him, and for whatever reason I just kind of glanced past it, I guess, and I didn't notice. And so if you look at the bike here, really, really cool bike. Everything's internally routed, which is great. But if you follow basically the shift cable, so here's the shift cable coming around, going through the tube, and it's coming down the tube. It actually exits through a little hole in the back seat post here. And I apologize if I don't use the correct terminology. Like I said, I'm a complete beginner for the sport, so I'm just going to make up words or relate it to other things that I know of. And that cable actually swings across, comes through this, I guess it'd be swing arm, and then it comes back out into the derailleur over here. And you've noticed that here, I already fixed the problem, but basically I have it wrapped with electrical tape here, and then basically for chain slap, kind of like a rubber grip here as well to protect it. But without this electrical tape, there's actually a hole that's exposed on the side, and it's to help route that cable through, and you can actually see it on the rear brake side a lot easier since it hasn't been covered up. And so this is the hole that I'm talking about. It's the exact same hole on the opposite side, but now obviously on my side it's been covered up. And you can already see that the cable is kind of like hanging out very, very slightly. It's not like deep routed into the frame. And so on the very first ride, thankfully it happened when I was about 2 miles out. And so it wasn't that big of an issue. I was pretty close to the parking lot. But you can also see that they give you a 34 tooth front sprocket here. And with this 34 front tooth sprocket, you can see the clearance that you get from that swing arm and basically the sprocket. We're talking maybe a millimeter or 2 millimeters at max. And so what ended up happening as I was going through, there was too much slack in this cable. And so when I was going on jumps or whatever, bumpy trails or whatever it is, that cable slowly worked itself out and it kind of like stuck out just a little bit here. And eventually it caught onto the sprocket. And as I was pedaling, it caught through the sprocket and just shredded that shifter cable to the basically where it was non-functioning anymore. And so thankfully, like I said, I was only about 2-3 miles out from the parking lot. I just set it up into single gear mode and then I just rode back to the parking lot. And so to me, this is, either an REI problem or just a ghost design problem, a combination of both maybe. Number one, ghost, their design obviously for this cable to run here and have this opening, really, really stupid, right? Like whether they should have had that opening on the back side, maybe on the top, maybe not even have the opening here and have the opening way back here so it's not so close. Obviously that is a ghost engineering problem. Where it potentially could have been an REI problem is maybe there was too much slack in the shifter cable line, and therefore it wasn't taut enough here, and basically that's how it got caught. I will give REI credit though. Like I said, I love the company. I basically sent them an email. I was like, hey, this kind of happened on the very, very first ride. Can I get a refund for, I want to keep the bike obviously, can I get a refund for basically the cable, the shifter cable, or any repairs that are associated with it? And literally, I think it was like 2 days later, they sent an email back and was like, hey, I know REI bike shops aren't open right now because of coronavirus, just take it to your local bike shop, get the repair there, send us the receipt, and then we'll cut you a check and we'll send you back whatever it is. And so great customer service to me, in my opinion. And therefore I'm really happy in that regard. And I've taken it out twice now. So I bought the cable, fixed it, and then I wrapped it really, really tightly with electrical tape here to cover it. And I've taken it out twice since then, haven't had any issues. The other easy route that somebody was telling me was like, you could have just routed the cable on top and just zip tied it on. I wanted the internal routing just because I like the aesthetics of it better. And hopefully that electrical tape holds up and doesn't have any issues. And so to be perfectly honest, that is probably the only issue that I have with the bike so far. To give you guys an idea, I think I said that I've been looking at other bikes. I only test rode, unfortunately, 2 other bikes right now. The 2020 Trans 3, which is a 27.5 bike. And then I also test rode a Santa Cruz Tallboy LT or a long travel, but I'm pretty sure that was a older bike, probably like 2013, 2014, 2015 Santa Cruz. And so all I can tell you guys is comparing it to those 2 bikes. I hate to say it, and the Tallboy was a carbon bike too, so super light. To me, this bike, as a beginner, I don't know much about mountain biking. I have a lot of motorcycle background, and so I feel like in a sense I can feel suspension settings pretty well, or I know how to verbalize suspension settings well. I felt like the suspension settings were obviously not quite as good, but in terms of geometry, and it's that modern geometry, I know a lot of people talk about it and promote it and say how important it is. To me, it was revolutionary how big of a difference the geometry made in terms of how easy the bike was to ride and or climb with. Downhill, I would say maybe the newer suspension or just the sag was set correctly now for me, or I went in and set the sag correctly. So maybe that made a difference in terms of how it felt. But in terms of climbing ability, that was the number one biggest difference that I could notice immediately off the bat. And so with the Trans 3 and then the Santa Cruz, there were sections where I was going uphill and I would be winded beyond belief, or I would hit a wall and have to go into, I guess it would be a bigger cog. So what is that? I don't know, higher gear, lower gear, whatever it is. So whatever gear it is where I'm getting closer and closer to the bigger cog. to try to basically increase my cadence to make it up these hills. And I would get so winded from that. And literally, I've only been riding, I guess it'd be 6 or 7 times, right? That's how new I am. Literally, when I hopped off the Trans 3 or the Santa Cruz and I hopped on this bike, the same climbs were night and day difference. And so I could be in, I think this might be a correct term, lower gear, I guess, whatever this is, and this would be a higher gear. If I'm wrong, sorry, but whatever it is, I would be able to go into a lower gear and just power my way up these hills and not have any issues whatsoever. And literally, like I said, I feel like I didn't get any fitter in a span of 2 weeks. It's only been a couple, like I've only ridden a couple times, and literally, like I said, I could have that lower gear and just power up that. And if you guys haven't looked into the whole geometry thing and you guys are all beginners like myself, to me, the noticeable difference was that freaking seat tube angle that they keep on talking about. And so I think the seat tube angle on this was like a 76.5 or 75.5, I can't remember. And I looked up the specs for the Trans 3 and then the older Santa Cruz, and the Trans 3 was like a 73.5, and then the Santa Cruz, I want to say it was like a 74 or something like that. And so, again, why the big difference, or why did it make it so much easier? It just literally feels like my body was farther out in front, and I could pedal. It felt like I was standing up and pedaling even though I was sitting. And so in the even more difficult sections, I could lean forward even more, stand up more, and then just power through that. While in the older settings, or the Trans 3 and other bikes, I felt like I was much further back, and basically I just had to keep on going to a higher and higher and higher gear to try to basically keep my cadence up because I couldn't maintain it. And so that was quote unquote revolutionary to me. And I keep on joking when I go out riding, it's like a cheater bike is what it feels like to me right now, because literally all the same climbs that I was doing on the other 2 bikes, and you could argue the Santa Cruz is a 100% nicer, better component, better spec bike, right? The Trans 3, probably in terms of specs wise, probably around this level as well. So yeah, other than that, like I said, everything's great. The only other kind of thing to point out to you guys is I set the sag on my rear shock, and it came from REI pretty spot on. I'm about 5'7", 5'8", 155 pounds. I think the sag was like 25% from the right out of the box. The front fork though, for however REI set it up, I only had like 5 millimeters of sag when it came out of the box, and so obviously it was probably aired up a little bit too much, and so I just kind of decreased the air pressure in that. Other than that, like I said, no issues, no problems. Love the bike. Big ups to REI as well for the great customer service. They actually, from the day of ordering this bike, they sent it to me within 3 days, and so I got it 3 days later, and literally just had to put on the front wheel, put on the handlebars, and that was basically it. So yeah, the dropper seat post is a little bit cheap, I would say. Whatever the distance this is the max distance, so pretty low spec dropper seat post, but for what it is, like I said, for $1,800, I thought that was a great deal. And then to me, the bigger concept too is like the year-long warranty from REI, where again, I'm not gonna return the bike because it's like, hey, I don't like mountain biking and I bought a bike on accident. But let's say if the shifter cable issue was a bigger problem, other components start breaking down, or we have other issues, I felt confident that, I could just go back to REI and be like, hey, here's the issues, here are the problems, can we talk about what our solutions are? And so that was kind of important as well for me. I know like Polygon, which is direct to consumer, it was just a 14-day riding period. So after 14 days, you're basically on your own. And so that's very, very similar to the other companies out there. Maybe they'll have a 14-day, maybe they'll have a 30-day kind of like warranty in terms of returns. But again, all in all, for $1,800, I'm having a freaking blast. I can ride trails better and feel, quote unquote, it feels easier than before. And that's what it all is about, right? Just other thing to point out too, I did convert this immediately to tubeless once I got the bike. I did the stereotypical Gorilla Tape and then basically just some orange sealant, and it held perfectly fine first try, no issues, no problems. And so yeah, other than that, if you guys have any questions in particular, I know this is already a pretty long video as is, but again, I just wanted to put it out there because when I was about to buy the spike, literally I felt like there were no reviews for it. And then if you do end up buying the spike, like you said, the biggest thing is you need to fix this issue immediately. To me, like, this is the #1 glaring flaw on the bike thus far. Other than that, like you said, absolutely love it. Yeah, good luck, have fun.